Hello and welcome to the First Citizens You First series. I am your host, Chuck Walkendorfer, President of Distribution at Think2Perform, kicking off our final session on improved decision-making and stress management. My colleague Ray Kelly and I will be tying this all together. For those of you who've been with us on this journey, you'll remember that Think2Perform is a business and sports performance firm. We work with executives, athletes, business owners, doctors and nurses in surgery, the FBI, to improve decision-making under pressure. And so what you'll remember if you've listened to any of these sessions in the past, performance in any area of life, I don't care what you do for a living, where you live, the color of your skin, male or female, is a function of three things. It's a function of our talent. Our talents are things that we can never remember learning, things that we were just naturally good at. So maybe things like math, or music or sports. Part number two are skills. Skills are things we develop over our lifetime. So I may have had a talent for music and I developed a skill to play the piano. And the third part of performance is decision making. So it's talent plus skill plus decision making equals performance. And of the three, decision making has twice the impact on our performance than talent and skill combined. I'm not suggesting that talent and skill don't matter. They just don't matter as much as decision making, and unlike our IQ, which we can't improve, unfortunately, we can't get any smarter, we can, with practice and focus and effort, become better decision makers. And we make about 35,000 decisions a day. Most of them we don't think about. So how we take our coffee in the morning, brushing our teeth, getting dressed, those are things that we live out of a part of our brain called the basal ganglia. That's the habit center part of our brain. And that allows the prefrontal cortex, the logical thinking part of our brain, to work on the bigger issues of the day. And so while we can't improve our IQ, we can't improve our decision making, and we don't have to make all 35,000 decisions a day better. But our goal here is if we made 2 or 3 or 4 decisions better a day, we're talking about close to 1,000 better decisions a year, and that has an impact. What we're talking about here in this series is decision making under pressure, specifically with our money. We've had some sessions on behavioral finance, which is decision making under pressure with your funds. Today, we're going to be tying all of these concepts together into our final session of the series. I am joined by my colleague, Ray Kelly. Ray is a senior vice president with Think2Perform. He joined us just exactly 10 years ago after a 21-year career as a financial services senior executive. He spent the majority of his career on the sales side of the business, compiling a stellar track record of developing high-performing leaders and teams. Ray began his career after receiving his BBA from the University of Michigan. His first position was as a financial analyst with IDS in Minneapolis. While working at IDS, he was the recipient of the highest award for employees, the Premier Performer Award. After moving to Dallas, Ray spent 13 years growing and building one of the most successful sales groups for American Express Financial Advisors in the history of the company. Ray's offices were recognized annually for top sales growth, retention, client satisfaction, and employee satisfaction. His focus on creating a leaderful culture allowed his group to influence the larger national organization on nearly all major initiatives, and created the opportunity for over a dozen of his leaders to be promoted to other positions across the company. Ray has a passion for helping people reach their potential and shaping cultures in which they live. He offers executive coaching and mentoring to leaders of all levels and conducts proven breakthrough leadership development training. We're lucky to have him here at Think2Perform because he's a sought-after national public speaker with an exceptional ability to move people from complacency to laughter, to tears to action. Ray and his beautiful wife, Amy, reside in Minnesota and have 4 mostly wonderful children. Ray, nice to have you with us.
It's good to be here. Those mostly wonderful children are mostly out of the house, but we're getting there, man. So it's good to be here.
That's fortunate. I think you and I both find ourselves with mostly wonderful children. Of course, we were hopefully mostly wonderful when we were kids, but we've been blessed with our own children. Well, it's nice to have you with us. We're going to help you tie all this together over this series. We started 6 months ago talking about the certainty of uncertainty. and the impact that that has on stress. And as many of us will remember, as uncertainty, ambiguity increases in life, so does our stress level. And with an increase in stress comes a decrease in our ability to manage ourselves, manage our emotions, and make good decisions. And so we talk about this optimal performance begins with self-management. What are your thoughts about that, Ray?
Yeah, I think that this is at the foundation. You know, one of the things I've learned in the series, just from you, Chuck, was I have no idea where they came up with this fact, but we make 35,000 decisions a day. Okay, and for me, that's a huge number, and the vast majority of those things we're unconscious about. Okay, but there are a whole bunch of these things we can become more conscious of and actually make better decisions if we're self-aware. And that self-awareness starts with self-management, but it starts with understanding how the brain works. Okay, in our series, one of the things we talked about was the human experiential triangle. Okay, when you have stimulus, the first thing that is activated for all human beings, we all experience life similarly, at least in the order in which we experience it. And the first thing is the self-awareness that our emotions are the first things that are activated. Okay, you've mentioned parts of the brain earlier in your intro. Well, the amygdala is the center part of your brain, and that's the emotional center. It takes 12 milliseconds before stimulus occurs and the brain reacts to it. And that's pretty darn fast. That's the fight or flight thing. It was built in us for safety, but that emotional center of our brain can be so activated at times, it can overwhelm the rational center of your brain,
Right.
which takes 40 milliseconds. Now, 40 milliseconds is still pretty fast, but it's 3.5 times slower than the emotional center. And I think that's one of the things to be really aware about in terms of optimal performance in stressful situations. In those times of uncertainty, we're activated emotionally first, okay? And in order to live in alignment more effectively, we have to become conscious of that fact and know that sometimes we're so emoted, it skips the rational center of our brain. We call that the amygdala hijack, okay? And so it's real important to be self-aware in terms of who we want to be optimally. So one of the things that we've, through our research, have shown is when people consciously reflect on their values, who they want to be ideally, when they reflect on their values more often, they make better, more consistent decisions more often. So back to those 35,000, those 2 to 4 to 5 decisions you make on a daily basis that can really make a difference in your life. Okay, at the foundation is the self-management and self-awareness. Okay, in order to have a better relationship, I think there's going to be a slide here that talks about this effectiveness. I think it's real important to understand at the foundation of self-awareness. When you're self-aware of how you're emoted, how you think, what your top values are, you'll make better decisions decisions more often. And that will lead to you actually managing your behavior more effectively, aligned with those values, okay? And this will lead to better relationships and more effective relationships with others in terms of whether you're a leader or just looking for an effective leadership with a friend or a colleague.
It's almost counterintuitive that, you know, for us to have a great relationship with other people, the person we have to pay the most attention to is ourselves. And I think, you know, and I don't know if you said this in one of our earlier sessions, but it's when we don't pay attention to ourselves that our decision-making and behavior is most at risk, right? And none of us is 100% self-aware 100% of the time.
That's one of the challenges about self-awareness is when you're not self-aware, you're unaware. You're not self-aware.
Yeah.
And I would write this down if I were listening. We judge ourselves. We judge our behaviors, our actions, our everything about ourselves based on our intention. Okay, our thought. Okay, I intended to be on time. I intended to say the right thing. I intended to be a helpful business partner. Other people judge you based on your actions and your behaviors. They don't know what's going on in your brain. Okay, but you were late. You were ineffective on that thing. But my intent was to help. Well, you weren't helpful at all. Okay, so we judge ourselves based on our intentions, and we judge other people based on their actions and their behaviors and their results. And there's often a disconnect. And this, again, is one of those things we judge others based on their actions and behaviors, okay? And this is one of the reasons why we give people closest to us the benefit of the doubt, Chuck.
In order for me to build a great relationship with someone else, the person I have to pay the most attention to is me, right? And the only person's behavior I can control is my own. And so we talked about this 3-bucket theory, right? How do you think about that?
Well, the interesting thing was that 35,000 decisions a day, the vast majority of those, which bucket do you think I'll remind everyone, bucket 1 is what you can control. And what you can control is only you, your thoughts, your actions, your attitude. You don't get to control your emotions. You can control what you do with your emotions. Now, bucket 2 is things that you can influence. And bucket 3 are things that are neither things you control or influence. It's everything else. Of the 3 buckets, Chuck, which of the 3 do you think the vast majority of those decisions, all of us make on a weekly basis are bucket 1, 2, or 3?
I think a lot of us focus on bucket 3.
Yeah.
Caught up. When I get frustrated, it's usually most often I'm focusing on bucket 3, not on bucket 1.
And that's exactly what I found is when you're stressed, almost always, not always, almost always, it's because it's in bucket 3. You have no control or influence on the weather, okay, the markets, what the politicians are going to do, what your children are doing or saying, whatever it is, it's bucket 3. And it really is. Now, I was teaching this recently to a group of my clients, and this young woman said to the group, she goes, the bucket I like the most is bucket 2. Bucket 2 is all about influence. She goes, I like to influence people, whether it's my children, the people I work with, the people who work for me, all these different things. I really enjoy bucket 2. And I said, Dee, the reason why you like bucket 2 so much is bucket 2, another word for it is leadership. Leadership's all about influence. The thing is, your influence grows if you focus on bucket 1, what you can control, your actions, your behaviors. People watch you, you're more consistent. Thus, they allow you to influence them. And your bucket 2 gets bigger the more time you spend in bucket 1. And that's one of the most important things to remember about the 3-bucket theory.
You just reminded me of an old Ralph Waldo Emerson quote that what you do speaks so loudly I cannot hear what you say, which to me illustrates a couple of things. One is the point you just made earlier. Other people judge us by our behavior. We judge us by our intention. And 2, leading by example, bucket 1 is going to set the tone for my influence in bucket 2. And for those listeners who maybe didn't hear the earlier series on the 3-bucket theory, there's only 2 things that go into bucket number 2. That's other people and our health. So we can't control our health. We can influence our health. And the way that we influence our health, just like the way we influence other people, is by controlling how much we eat and how much we exercise. Those are decisions we make every single day. So I know when I get frustrated in my life, as we were saying earlier, it's usually because I've been focused on the wrong bucket. When I focus on bucket 1, I'm paying attention to the solution. What can I do?
Yeah, I was watching the news one night during the pandemic, and I got upset. Okay, and I remember probably saying an inappropriate word and turning off the TV. And again, my wife, my mirror, she said, why don't you practice what you preach? What are you going to do about it? She basically said, what are you going to do about it? It's the pandemic. It's all the politics, all these different things. All of it. I was sitting there, it's all bucket 3. It's all bucket 3, and I'm upset. And she says, what are you going to do about it? I said, you're right. I'm going to go exercise. I'm going to go for a walk. And then I'm going to build a class that helps people to actually do less of what I just did. And that was, I focused on bucket 1. What I controlled, my health. Okay, I don't control my health. I control actually my exercise that leads to potential good health.
Exactly right.
Okay, I was going to exercise because of that I can control. Okay, it's going to change reframe my way of thinking. And I think one of the tools that we taught during one of the sessions called the alignment model may be the most valuable tool in this series. Me personally, I call this the Swiss Army knife. Now, the reason why I call it the Swiss Army knife is years ago, I was part of a company-wide project, and at the end of the project, they gave us all a gift for contributing, and my gift was a Swiss Army knife. And of all the tools in my tool kit, my toolbox at home, it's the tool I've used by far the most, Chuck. Probably 70, 80% of the time. And there's like 28 different tools, screwdrivers, knives, toothpicks, corkscrews. Mine has a magnifying glass. It has a pen on it. When I'm walking around doing stuff on a Saturday around the house, I carry that thing with me because I don't want to run back and get the Phillips head screwdriver. This thing has it. It's got all these different tools, and that's what I've done. This alignment model is that tool that I've used in terms of running my businesses and making great decisions more consistently, more often. Because first and foremost, the reason why I call it a Swiss Army knife, it can be used in 4 different spots. First, it can be used with yourself, living in alignment with yourself. And I'll describe what that means here in a second. Secondly, is with the people you lead, the people that report to you. Third place, at least in the business I was in, I could use this with my clients. I was helping them live in alignment more often. And finally, any business owner, businesses are either in alignment or not in alignment. Okay, so it's 4 different spots, and there are a lot of tools that come off of this alignment model that we've taught during the course of this series, but we may not even know where it fits. So we're going to describe those. So let me talk about the alignment model real quickly. First, frame 1. Frame 1 is who I am ideally. Okay, who I am ideally. We call this the moral compass. This is your principles, your values, and your beliefs. This is who I want to be ideally. Sometimes we may say the word, what is my vision for myself? What's the vision for my business? Then there's frame 3. We'll go to the far right side. Frame 3 is who I am really. That's my behavior, my actions, my thoughts, my feelings, the results that I'm getting. And the thought is, can I live in alignment more often? Can my real self be aligned with my ideal self more often? We use frame 2, the middle frame, to help balance, keep it in alignment. We set goals.
Kind of measure our progress along the way towards that vision or values we've got.
You got it. When in our series, we talked about a concept called Witty Wiffy. What do you want for yourself? Because what we have found with goals is people that write their goals down are twice as likely to achieve it than people who just keep it in their head. If you share it out loud with someone, Witty Wiffy, what do you want for yourself? The whole process is about sharing it with your go-to, your enablers, the people that can help you. You go from twice as likely, which is a written goal, to 10 times more likely to live in alignment. It doesn't guarantee it. It just increases the likelihood my ideal self and my real self are aligned. And one of the tools that we all learned earlier in one of the sessions, the values card exercise. That's frame 1. Most people have never asked themselves the question, who am I ideally? Who do I want to be ideally? The values card exercise is an exercise that I know we have it online with Think2Perform.com, but it's an exercise you can do to ask yourself, what are the values I want to live by? To guide my decision making, especially under stress and strain. Okay, and then we get to frame 3, that's my real self. And that exercise, the freeze game, is when you stop and go freeze. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What am I doing? And then asking yourself, is it alignment with frame 1?
Here's what I'm about to do in alignment with my goals and my values and who I hope to be. And I think for those listeners today, you were talking to First Citizens clients and customers. You may have heard an earlier session where we talked about the dominant factor in portfolio growth is saving and investing behavior. That accounts for 87% of portfolio growth. So how much someone saves and invests and how long they stay invested matters more than in investment selection, asset allocation, and market timing combined. And back to our 3-bucket theory, saving and investing behavior is what we can control. And so the reason First Citizens asks about goals and wants to understand your values is that because when you get emotional about your money, because you will, if they can help you reflect on your goals and your values, it'll guide your decision making. And to your point, Ray, make better decisions, ideally.
Yeah, people who reflect on their values while making decisions are much more effective and have much more consistent decision making, especially if you can do it during stressful times. And it's back to a down market. Chuck, there were some statistics that came out of Fidelity during the months of February and May, where nearly a third of retired clients of Fidelity sold out of 100% of their equity positions between February and May.
Mm.
Okay, we know what happened in February. The market went down almost 40%, but it almost recovered the entire 40% back in that period of time. Most of those people locked into those gains because they allowed their emotions, and again, back to the experiential triangle, the emotions that you're feeling are real. So people were scared, they were afraid. Okay, but when you're working with a financial professional per se, they can hold you back to, hey, who do you want to be ideally? Okay, I understand that you're afraid. Let's look at your goals. Is it short-term, long-term, etc.? You will make better decisions more often. And all our studies and research show that. And it's so important to be self-aware when you're living that. And don't allow the amygdala, the emotional center of your brain, to hijack your rational brain. That's what happened to so many of those people at Fidelity. The amygdala ended up controlling the decision-making process. That's where we make less effective decisions.
Well, and a bit of self-disclosure, I know I consider taking my money out of the market in April or May, right? I was subject to the same, oh crap, this could get worse. But I, because of my own self-awareness, because I know once you take your money out, the next big decision you have is, when do I put it back? Right? And I have a financial advisor. I know this stuff. I've practiced these tools, and I was at least aware enough. I wasn't able to avoid the feeling, to your point. I was just as afraid and concerned as everybody else. But I did have the awareness to be able to choose a different response and chose not to take my money out of the market. Now, I've certainly made plenty of mistakes. I'm just using that as an illustration to, if you're employing some of these tools we're talking about, the difference it can make in your decision making.
Yeah, and that's preparing for the certainty of uncertainty. We did that in another one of our sessions. We prepared for the certainty of uncertainty, and we used the smart money philosophy, which you will recall is, Chuck, if you knew no matter what was happening in the world, good markets, bad markets, good health, bad health, all of these things, you got all these variables going on, no matter what, if you knew that there was a smart place to get to your money, would you feel less stressed and more confident?
Yeah.
Of course, the answer is yes. And that's the whole thing about the smart money philosophy. By working with a financial professional with a plan, you actually are preparing for all of these potential things that can go up and down. But one of the things I do know is I don't know which direction is going next week, tomorrow, but I'm going to prepare for whatever the situation may be, and I'll feel less stress. Thus, I make better decisions.
Well, absent the knowledge of our goals and our values, all we have left to operate on is the emotion. And so we've been talking about here today with the experiential triangle. So emotions are real, just like thoughts are real. And emotions aren't good or bad. It's what I do with the emotion that makes it good or bad. So I would have felt anger, maybe fear and frustration back in April or May with my money. And emotions tend to sacrifice accuracy for speed. You've heard us say that before. They want us to respond very quickly and are usually wrong. So acting on my fear or anxiety around my money would have caused me to take my money out of the market. But because I was able to get myself into this low right-hand quadrant, we're going to talk about how to do that in just a minute, a challenge, connected, and confident, I was able to think more rationally and make a different choice. these tools, these concepts are simple but not easy. So simple and easy are not synonymous, but it does require us playing the freeze, to Ray's point. Notice if we're getting emotional. Understand that when we're emotional, we're not going to make great choices. And then know how to take us down in this lower right-hand quadrant. So Ray, what's the tool we use to get us into this lower right-hand quadrant? How do we do that?
Yeah, how to do it more often. And the tool that I was lucky to learn, I want to say 20 years ago, is the 4 R's. And the word practice the 4 R's is very important. I think you mentioned Rick Aberman in an earlier broadcast, and Rick is one of the founders of Think2Perform and a trained psychologist. And a lot of his work he did with athletes. And one of the things he was talking about is you don't teach the relief pitcher in the bottom of the 9th inning to go through the 4 R's, and he does it for the first time in the 9th inning in a stressful situation. We teach these people to practice it every single day so that when he's in the 9th inning, he's doing something. Practice makes permanent. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. He gets used to doing this. This is something that I did for 15 straight years, Chuck. Okay. I was smart enough to listen to some guy named Doug Lennox, who also is a pretty smart guy, who said, practice this. It will profoundly change your lives. So let me go through this, because part of this stuff is you've heard before. It's called something else. The first R is recognize. That's playing the freeze game, folks. So recognize what you're experiencing. Stop. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What am I doing? Okay? Okay, is this in alignment with who I want to be ideally? The second R is reflecting. Part of that reflection is how is this impacting who I want to be ideally? How is this impacting other people? Is this in alignment with what I want? If the answer is no, I reframe. Okay, I think about it differently. That's what I wrote on my top of my day timer for 15 years when I had a paper day timer. Every single week I'd write, think about what you think about. And it was for me to practice this exercise, a stop. Understand the emotions you're going through. What are you thinking? Bucket 1, 2, or 3. It was for me to kind of assess all this so I could reframe. And back to the fourth R is responding. Could I make better decisions more often? And what we stated at the beginning, Chuck, 35,000 decisions on a daily basis. That's a lot. But if we can be self-aware and improve the decision of just a couple of those, 2 or 3 a day, that's 1,000 decisions that I'm more effective with over the course of a year. Next thing you know, that's a big difference in
5, 10, 20 years later, that's a lot of better decisions.
Yeah, so Chuck, the question I have for you, when you live in alignment, you practice the 4 R's, because I think the practice the 4 R's is frame 3, your real self, and checking back frame 2 and frame 1. Is what I'm doing, what am I feeling, all of these things is in line with what I want to be doing? Is it aligned with my goals and my vision for myself or my organization? And it's back to becoming self-aware to become more effective long-term. Because when you live in alignment, ultimately, what do you get?
Success.
Yeah, success. And I believe success is, I just use the word happy.
Right.
I just find I'm happy more often when I'm living in alignment.
Yeah, we might have different values and different goals, but I think if we're all living our values and achieving our goals, we would all consider ourselves successful.
Absolutely.
But it begins with me, is what I hear you saying, right? It begins with me knowing my values and my goals. It then involves me practicing the freeze game multiple times a day. So when I'm out of alignment, I can employ the 4 R's to get back into alignment. Is that kind of summarize what we're talking about here today?
Yeah. And simple but not easy.
Absolutely.
Simple but not easy. Building the human habit of practicing this. This is why for 15 years I wrote it at the top of my day timer. Okay. I actually signed up for an app through Think2Perform. And we got this app where they randomly, over the course of a day, 6 times would send me a message over my phone that basically said freeze game. And it was for me to practice this. Was what I was doing right at the moment I got that was in alignment with who I wanted to be ideally.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I learned how to use the freeze game anytime I felt really emoted. So if I was in traffic and someone cut me off, instead of allowing that to escalate and road rage or something like that, I took the deep breath, bucket 1, 2, or 3. Who do you want to be ideally? All of those things. I practiced that so that when I was in business meetings, when someone said the wrong thing, that I was starting to get tense, freeze game. Okay. Who do you want to be ideally here, Ray?
Right.
And again, I'm talking to Ray, which is part of self-talk. That's another session. I talk to Ray all the time. I talk to myself in the third person. Kind of weird. But what we found, back to that ideal state of energy, when you talk to yourself in the third person, you feel more confident. You feel less stressed. You feel like someone's there supporting you. There's like a buffer between the situation and you. And that's that other person talking to Ray. That's why I encourage my clients to talk to themselves in the third person. So I've been talking to Ray a lot, of course, the last few decades.
Well, it's clear clear Ray's been listening at least to most of whatever Ray's been talking about. Ray, I want to thank you for your time today and your wisdom. I know you've guested 4 of these 12 sessions, and it's been fantastic to have your perspective. It's been better to have you tie it all together. If our audience would like to learn more about what we've been discussing, you can go back and listen to these sessions. They've all been pre-recorded. You can also contact Kyle DeBell in our office. He's our director of sales at kdebell@think2perform.com, or visit our website, as Ray mentioned, to learn more about what we have to offer, and even take our virtual card exercise to discover your top 5 values. If you have questions for your First Citizens professional, please contact them at firstcitizens.com. They're more than willing to have a discussion with you around your goals and your values, and ideally put together a plan, a financial plan that employs, as Ray mentioned, the smart money philosophy. So on behalf of Ray Kelly and myself, I want to thank you for your time and attention here today. Continue to practice and play these exercises and apply these tools in your own life, and hopefully our paths will cross again at some point in the future. Take care.